This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on Indian Pharma winning global trust, rise in India's exports of pharmaceutical products. The participants are Sharat Kohli, economic analyst, and Arjun J. Chaudhary, AIR correspondent.
So I'm joined by Shri Sharat Kohli, our expert on today's Spotlight program, and the subject of our discussion is on India. Pharma winning the global trust, rise in India's exports of pharmaceutical products. And the reason why we're discussing this particular topic is because India's exports have gone up by 138% for the April to October period, and as a result of which clearly that's adding to our dollar revenues that come in. Sharad, let's begin by understanding what the exports are really about when it comes to pharmaceuticals. Are we talking about generic drugs which are manufactured in India and then exported and that are FDA approved?
Well, as far as exports are concerned, I think India is almost now getting to a 360-degree coverage of the entire range of pharmaceutical products. To name some of them, I would say the active pharmaceutical ingredients, the APIs. We're looking at drug intermediaries. We're looking at key starting material. We're looking at generic drugs. We're looking at generic medications. So I think India is pretty much, now into, and if I expand this further, even the medical goods now, which we used to import at one point of time, now they are being manufactured here at a very, very cost-efficient level. And I think we are in a position, we will be in a position to export at a very large scale. The medical goods, which includes the diagnostic equipment, which includes the therapeutic equipment and so forth. So I think Indian dominance in the world pharmaceutical market is getting stronger by the day. And if you look at since you refer about the exports, it's worth mentioning that India today is amongst the top 10 pharma exporting countries, which is, and India is currently exporting to about 200 odd countries. So which means somewhere, somebody at some point is always consuming an Indian-made medicine or an Indian-made drug to get rid of the ailment. So which is, I think, a matter of pride for every Indian. And if we look at the numbers, Arjun, for the financial year 21, $24.44 billion worth of export was done. And in financial year 22, it was 24.6 billion, and it's been rising all through. I'm talking, of course, the year ending March 22, and thereafter we've seen a phenomenal rise. And this is all thanks to the vaccines and all thanks to the phenomenal research and development which has been done in the Indian pharmaceutical sector. And when it comes to vaccine, Arjun, we are almost doing 50% vaccines as far as the world requirements are concerned, which means every second vaccine being given to a child or to anybody for that matter in the world is coming from India. We almost have a 40% share of the US generic demand, and we should not forget that US is one of the largest markets and one of the most stringent markets in drugs. They've got very strong FDA norms which you cannot bypass. The quality of the medicine, the level of confidence of the medicine has to be extremely high. And it's a matter of pride that we have 40% of that generic demand in the US. When it comes to UK, we've got 25%. I think most number of US FDA-approved companies, if I remember correctly, about 500 FDA-approved companies in the US come from India, which is a record in itself. No other country has been able to get those many approval for manufacturing facilities in India as far as FDA is concerned. And we all know how stringent and how particular FDA is in giving approval to the companies around the world, Arjun.
So if you look at vaccines, we've had the collaborations with research institutions like the ICMR, the Indian Council of Medical Research, and then you have the NIV, the National Institute of Virology, with whom the private sector has collaborated to produce these vaccines. How is it that we have led the global market when it comes to exports? Now it's the third largest exporter as far as the drugs are concerned, generic drugs. How did we come about achieving this?
I would give 3 points where we have won over. The first point is the low cost of production, because we all know that in the Western world, pharmacies and anything related to drugs is extremely, extremely expensive. And for most of the families, especially the middle class and the lower middle class, it gets beyond the point where they can afford. That's the first point. The second and a very important point which has been India's USP is the research and development. I think R&D, as far as India is concerned, has been very strong on the pharmaceutical front, because We today have over 3,000 companies, Arjun, as far as pharmaceuticals is concerned, and they've got manufacturing facilities which are over 10,500 to be precise. If we call them factories or call them manufacturing facilities, almost each one of them. You have a very strong, if you ever get a chance, I mean, our listeners, if they get a chance, they should try and visit a pharmaceutical company. You will find that their lab where research and development is almost round the clock. It's year round, and this research is done extensively. There's a lot of effort which is put into the research, and it converts to a new invention. And I think that is where India has been scoring. And the third point I would like to mention here is the level of trust which the world has developed for Indian medicines. I think the more people get cured around the world at the minimal cost, I think that is what is giving India the edge over rest of the countries from where the drug requirements are being sourced.
So we have a national vision by Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi about One Earth, One Health, and this is something that he stated at Davos, where the World Economic Forum was being held in Argentina. How important is support for the development of the private sector when it comes to increased production and export?
Absolutely. I mean, no sector in the country can thrive unless it is supported by the will of the government, by the political will. Unless you have the political will, there is no way a sector can flourish. I mean, we've seen this. The classical example of this aspect has been in China's tech sector suffered because the government wasn't supporting. So if we look at some of the, the things which go in supporting what I'm saying, if you look at the budget of 2022-23, the budget allocation just for research, as far as Government of India is concerned, was 3,201 crore just for the research, the government allocation. If you look at the allocation made to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, there was about 83,000 crores of allocation made. Your National Health Mission, we all know, you keep hearing these ads, you see on the roadside the National Health Mission promotion which the government does, the awareness which the government creates. 37,000 crore allocation for that. And of course, we should not forget Ayush Mantralaya here, because pharmaceutical industry, Arjun, today is not simply limited, allopathy. It's not limited to simply drug intermediaries. It's not limited to APIs. Today, pharmaceutical industry is very inclusive. We should not forget Ayurveda. We should not forget biotechnology. We should not forget the traditional methods of treatment where India is rapidly, gaining momentum as far as the acceptability around the world is concerned. So I think the will of the government has been very evident from these kind of allocations in the budget, that how conscious the government is of the fact that a helping hand, a supporting hand of the government is required to make sure that we become the pharmacy of the world and grow at a very, very rapid pace. I was looking at the growth over the last 5 years. We almost have a CAGR of about 10%, which is one of the best in any industry for that matter, Arjun.
So the principal challenge at the time of COVID was the lack of active pharmaceutical ingredients, the APIs that you mentioned earlier, for ramping up production, and China had a lead there. How is it that we managed to get access to these APIs and boost our export competitiveness, which has now gone up by 138% for the quarter?
People have been hearing Prime Minister's speeches over this while. When he speaks about Atmanirbhar Bharat, a classic example that he gives is that when Corona broke out and when the first lockdown happened, and then he announced the Atmanirbhar Bharat plan, I think the first example that he gives is, for example, PPE kits. When people needed, when the hospitals needed, when the clinics needed, when the doctors needed, we never used to manufacture PPE kits. I mean, they were a rare commodity as far as our country is concerned. And today, we are exporting PPE kits to the rest of the world. I mean, we talk of sanitizers, we talk of PPE kits, we talk of vaccines, which you already mentioned. I think in a space of about 2.5 to 3 years, from looking around the world for these things, suddenly we become massive suppliers of these things. So I think it shows that how resilient and how innovative our country is, and how entrepreneurial our country is, and how conscious our country is, that how quickly we can fulfill the missing requirement, what is missing in the world. We quickly grab that opportunity. So this is called making of the crisis an opportunity. I think I'm very confident that India would be able to help them fight over the whole problem comprehensively, because we've got so much of experience and we've got so much of and research behind us that we can easily help them in overcoming. And it has helped around the world. If you see 200 countries around the world today, Arjun, it's not a joke. The total number of countries around the world are more than 200, little more than 200. Out of them, 200 are dependent on our drugs and pharmaceuticals. So I think that speaks volumes. And a very pertinent point I would like to mention here. In June 21, I remember our Finance Minister, Honorable Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, she announced the PLI scheme for the pharmaceutical industry over the next 5 years. And I remember the amount announced was 1,97,000 crores. And this covered APIs, this covered intermediaries. It also covered key starting materials, which is a very important thing for pharmaceutical industry. So over the next 5 years, this PLI scheme will not just generate employment, it will not just promote more capital formation in the pharmaceutical industry, but it would also further establish India's dominance in the world of pharmacy.
So clearly it is a strong leverage when it comes to framing your trade agreements with countries like the United Arab Emirates and Australia, with whom I believe negotiations are taking place. What is the Health Minister Mansukh Mandaviya's position on this to ensure that this performance is maintained and it continues to grow?
Any FTA discussion which goes around the world, take for example the recent FTA with Australia, or take for example the ongoing discussion with the United Kingdom, which incidentally could not materialize because of the change in the political circles in the UK, and we are hoping that will happen very soon. I would like to mention here that pharmaceutical is amongst the top of the list. And this is one thing where India is not found wanting. In fact, it's the other country, whosoever we are signing off, they ensure and they make sure that India keeps a soft corner, making sure that there's uninterrupted supply of the pharmaceutical products and pharmaceutical related stuff which should be provided to the country. So I think today India can dominate or dictate terms because of its strength in the pharmaceutical sector. So it gives India that leverage. It gives India that trump card that, when we are signing an FTA, so on the basis of the strength in pharmaceuticals, we are able to get better deals in some of the other sectors as far as tariffs are concerned, as far as promoting other Indian products are concerned.
So this synergy of cost savings and delivery on the part of our suppliers for export markets, are we replicating that for domestic consumption as well? Are we removing the scourge of spurious medicines and ensuring quality control at dispensing centers?
Oh yes, India's drug administration is getting stronger, and we cannot, de-align the exports from the domestic market. I mean, we can't say that we are making a very good drug for exports, and our internal drugs are compromising on quality. I think gone are the days. We cannot delineate the two things and say that two are separate. I think if you look at the total FDI flows in India in the pharmaceutical sector, over the last 22 years, we've almost had $20 billion being invested in India, and I think the Indian Drug Administration, the Director General Drug, or in each region, they are ensuring that there is no spurious medicine. There are surprise checks being made at the pharmacies when the goods leave the factories. I think there is a very strong checkpoint created there to make sure that when they reach from the factories to the wholesalers, from the wholesalers to the retailers, and then from the retailers to the end consumers, no drug can now be sold which is sensitive without a doctor's prescription. You cannot just go and buy anything without a doctor's prescription. I think if you see the pharmacies today are changed. And I think another major change which is happening in the retailing of drugs is that we have today the branded companies or big business groups who are entering the retail. I think that is causing a revolution because, for those roadside small colony pharmacies, today the pharmacies have become chains. I think, and these chains ensure that there is a uniform quality standard which is maintained all through the distribution process.
So as of now, we are the primary producers of generic drugs. Do you see us upping our game to actually creating drugs which are new to the market and on the basis of research and development and collaboration so that, we are able to dictate terms in the pharmacy world?
Well, research and development is a constant in the market. I mean, for pharmacies, research and development just cannot afford to stop. That's my first point. My second point is that today where research and development is going is the chronic diseases. I think if India focuses, or the R&D in India focuses on chronic disease therapies, like for example, cardiovascular, for example, anti-diabetes, for example, antidepressants, for example, cancer-fighting drugs. So these are 4 or 5 areas where there's a lot of research happening. And I think if this research culminates into new innovations, into new inventions, into new creations, I think India's dominance will only become stronger. And the world is completely, totally, absolutely going to depend on Indian drug and pharmaceutical industry, Arjun.
Well, thank you so much, Sharad, for giving us your views on the pharmaceutical market in India and how it's able to lead exports. The results speak for themselves, 138% rise for the quarter, and informing our listeners on how the drug market is transitioning from manufacturing generic drugs to new drugs because of innovation. Thank you so much, Sharad.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on Indian Pharma winning global trust, rise in India's exports of pharmaceutical products. The participants were Sharat Kohli, economic analyst, and Arjun J. Chaudhary, AIR correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.